Hello and welcome. It's Friday, the 11th of April. You're tuned in to our 10 a.m. newscast here on ARIRANG TV. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. A UN sanctions committee meets to coordinate an international response to North Korea's recent ballistic missile firings and Pyongyang's nuclear test threats. Korea's top court rejects a group of lung cancer patients' final appeals for compensation from the country's largest tobacco company. Plus, Russian President Vladimir Putin says Gazprom may have no choice but to cut its gas supply to Ukraine after Kiev missed a deadline to pay its $2.2 billion bill. We begin with the international community's efforts to counter the ongoing threat posed by North Korea. A UN sanctions committee has been mulling over ways to punish Pyongyang for its recent ballistic missile launches that have destabilized the region somewhat. This as the defense chiefs of South Korea and the United States picked up the phone to coordinate their North Korea policies. Shin Se-min starts us off.
The UN's North Korea Sanctions Committee gathered for an emergency meeting at UN headquarters on Thursday local time to discuss North Korea's recent missile launches and concerns a fourth nuclear bomb test could be in the works. Meeting for the first time since Pyongyang launched 2 mid-range ballistic missiles late last month, sources said the committee decided the firings were in clear violation of UN resolutions and it would come up with countermeasures to deal with the threat. South Korea, the U.S., Britain, and France are said to have supported the statement, but China and Russia said the wider issue of securing peace and stability on the Korean peninsula was the most pressing concern. The committee agreed to meet again in May for further discussions. A day before the committee meeting, South Korean Defense Minister Kim Kwan-jin and his U.S. counterpart Chuck Hagel agreed to work hand-in-hand to counter threats posed by Pyongyang. During a 20-minute phone conversation, the two officials agreed that Pyongyang's missile and nuclear weapons pose a grave challenge to the Korean peninsula as well as the international community. Also on Thursday, a former U.S. non-proliferation official said the international community should step up its efforts for targeted sanctions on the North Korean leadership. Speaking at a forum hosted by the 38 North website, Joseph De Thomas said it was important to find targeted mechanisms that go after the leadership rather than the North Korean people. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Diplomatic efforts to breathe fresh life into the long-stalled six-party talks on North Korea's denuclearization are underway once again, hot on the heels of a three-way meeting between the nuclear envoys of South Korea, the US and Japan earlier this week. Seoul's chief delegate heads to China on this Friday for a two-day meeting also focused on North Korea. Connie Kim reports.
In efforts to make a breakthrough in resuming the stalled six-party talks, South Korea's chief delegate Hwang Jung-guk will visit Beijing Friday to meet with his Chinese counterpart Woo Da-wei. Hwang will likely discuss the results of trilateral talks he attended in Washington with the U.S. and Japan. Their meeting is expected to draw specific measures and flexible preconditions to bring Pyongyang back to the negotiating table. Shortly after the bilateral meet, Woo will head to Washington to discuss the outcome of his 4-day trip to North Korea late last month and reopening the six-party talks. The news of Woo's upcoming trip comes a day after South Korea, the U.S., and Japan agreed to be more flexible when dealing with the communist state. The three nations had previously been firm on resuming talks only if Pyongyang took concrete steps to end its nuclear program. Now that all three nations appear ready to compromise, attention is turning to China and its role as mediator. Beijing remains as a secluded state's biggest ally, and narrowing down the different political interests of involved parties may be the biggest factor in resuming the six-way talks with the North. While making inroads overseas on the issue, South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se has warned Pyongyang that it'll pay an unimaginable cost should it carry out a fourth nuclear test. Speaking at a forum on reunification Thursday, Yoon said that the international community, including China, stands unified and is determined to denuclearize North Korea. The nuclear talks have been stalled since late 2008 over repeated provocations by Pyongyang. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
The prime ministers of South Korea and China have agreed to cooperate to prevent North Korea from carrying out further nuclear provocations. Meeting on the sidelines of the 13th Boao Forum in Hainan, China on Thursday, Jung Hong-won urged his Chinese counterpart Li Keqiang to do all he can to make sure Pyongyang doesn't carry out further nuclear tests. According to South Korean officials, Li said China strongly opposes Pyongyang's nuclear development. The two delegations also held in-depth discussions on issues ranging from air pollution to stronger economic ties in the form of their envisioned free trade agreement. A senior UN official says the recent report on North Korea's human rights abuses will denounce its leader Kim Jong-un and bring him before the International Criminal Court. Speaking at the Japan National Press Club in Tokyo on Thursday, Masuki Durasman said the regime's grave human rights abuses were being brought to the international law track. The UN Commission report released back in February said that crimes against humanity have taken place and continue to take place in North Korea. It also said the violations must be addressed under international human rights law. Darasman said Commission members from the US, France and Luxembourg will gather next week for a Security Council meeting where they will urge the Council to seek legal actions against the North Korean leader. Back here in South Korea, and the country's newly formed main opposition party says it will field party-nominated candidates for the June local elections, going back on an earlier pledge to abandon the nomination system. The ruling party was quick to pounce Thursday, saying opposition leader Ahn Cheol-soo's vision for so-called new politics is already doomed. Ji Myung-gil reports.
The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy announced Thursday that the party will field candidates for lower-level administration chiefs and councillors in the June local elections, reversing an earlier pledge to abolish the nomination system altogether. The party reached the decision after a public opinion survey and an intra-party vote.
The results reflect 50% of the vote from each side, the party member voters and public opinion survey. 53.44% were in favor of the party nomination system, while 46.56% were against it.
Both of the party's co-leaders said they would honor the results.
From today, I will do my best to win the June local elections. We have a rough road ahead, but I ask for the support of our party members. If we do not bring about reform, we will not win in the next presidential election.
The party will field candidates for the June local elections. We will bring an end to the controversies over the nominating system. We will stop President Park Geun-hye and the ruling party from winning, as they have broken their promises with the people.
The ruling's Henry Party immediately criticized the decision, saying the newly unified opposition party had already thrown away its bid for New Politics by overturning numerous promises. New Politics has been Ah's trademark policy since he entered politics in 2012. He says it's aimed at restoring public confidence by eliminating corruption and having politicians lay down their vested interests. Abolishing the party-centered nomination system was a key campaign pledge of both the ruling and opposition parties during the 2012 presidential campaigns, with many believing it acts as a breeding ground for bribery and corruption. Ji Myung-gil, ARIRANG News.
Now, Korea's central bank has adjusted the nation's growth forecast for this year to 4%. That's up 0.2 percentage points from an earlier estimate. This following the bank's monthly rate-setting session, where it left the key rate unchanged for April. Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
The Bank of Korea says the domestic economy is beginning to return to its normal growth track. In its new growth outlook released Thursday, the central bank forecasts the Korean economy to grow 4% this year, compared to 3% growth in 2013.
The pace of recovery we're seeing now is 4% annual growth. This is matching up with the nation's potential growth rate.
The new growth forecast is up 0.2 percentage points from the central bank's earlier outlook in January.
But the bank said the upward revision does not mean the domestic economy is on track to a stronger recovery. Instead, it cited the central bank's recently adopted new international standards on calculating gross domestic product.
The new standards, which include contributions from new sectors like research and development, mainly led the rise in the growth forecast. The outlook itself is not that different from January.
For next year, the bank expects the Korean economy to grow 4.2%, also up 0.2 percentage points. However, it lowered the nation's inflation outlook for this year to 2.1%, citing a drop in prices of agricultural products in the first quarter. The Bank of Korea also left its key interest rate unchanged at 2.5% for the 11th straight month in April, as widely expected. The central bank went on to say that there could be a rate hike in the second half of this year if inflation goes up. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
Now to some positive news on the country's trade front. Korea's exports of information, communication and technology products set a new record for the first 3 months of this year. The Trade Ministry says outbound ICT shipments grew almost 9% in March from a year ago to $15 billion. The $41.2 billion recorded in the first quarter marks a new quarterly high. The sector also enjoyed a record trade surplus. Growing shipments to key trading partners like the US and China is credited with the record numbers, with mobile phones, semiconductors and even televisions all logging strong growth. Now, growth might be the answer to most things in terms of the economy, but the World Bank says it's not enough when it comes to ending global poverty. The World Bank said in a report on Thursday that while economic growth remains a good way to reduce poverty, it does have its limits. The report is urging developing countries to enhance growth with policies that allocate more resources to the extreme poor by promoting more inclusive growth or through government programs. World Bank President Jim Yong Kim said the number of people earning less than $1.25 a day will have to decrease by 50 million each year if the bank is to reach its goal of eradicating extreme poverty by 2030. Time now to take a look at the international headlines we're following at this hour. For that, we're going to turn to our Eunice Kim standing by at the news center. Hello to you, Eunice. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin says Moscow may be forced to cut its gas supply to Ukraine after Kiev has missed a deadline to pay a huge bill.
Hi, Mark. That's right. Russia's gas company Gazprom recently placed Kiev's bill at $2.2 billion, you'll remember. And now, in an open letter to 18 EU leaders, President Putin said Gazprom will be compelled to require upfront payments if the back payments are not made, and, as a last resort, could completely or partially cease gas deliveries. Ukraine's energy minister fired back, saying Moscow was using gas as a political weapon, citing the recent unacceptable price hikes handed to Ukraine. The U.S. has also echoed the accusation. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, pro-Russian separatists occupying 2 buildings in Donetsk and Luhansk have rejected a government offer of amnesty. Earlier, Ukrainian President Oleksandr Turchinov made the offer in exchange for their surrender. Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk is set to head to the eastern city of Donetsk on this Friday to examine the situation. A UN peacekeeping mission will soon be dispatched to the Central African Republic, concerned to be spiraling into genocide in a bloody conflict between Christians and Muslims. The mission, made up of up to 10,000 troops and 1,800 police officers, was unanimously approved by the UN Security Council Thursday. It also urged the Central African Republic to accelerate preparations to hold free, fair, transparent, and inclusive presidential and legislative elections no later than February 2015. Thousands have been killed and hundreds of thousands more were displaced in the impoverished African nation after the mostly Muslim Seleka took power a year ago and unleashed abuses on the majority Christian population. A possible fifth ping was detected in the hunt for Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 Thursday. This according to Chief Australian Search Coordinator Angus Houston, who said the data would be confirmed after further analysis overnight. Unlike the 4 other audio signals that were detected by the U.S. towed pinger locator aboard Australia's Ocean Shield, the latest find was picked up by a RAAF AP-3C Orion aircraft in the same vicinity. Ocean Shield is canvassing a zone some 1,600 kilometers away from Perth, Australia. And Greece returned to the bond market with a bang Thursday, raising 3 billion euros after attracting an excess of 20 billion euros in investor interest. Athens offered a yield of 4.95% on the 5-year bonds, a much lower rate than analysts had expected. Thursday's bond sale, the first in 4 years, would allow for the Greek government and companies to borrow more and cheaper from international markets in the future.
That a team of South Korea.
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. ARIRANG News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers 15 billion. Korea's domestic film industry has been on a roll in recent years, with a number of great independent movies doing pretty well across the country. However, the simple pleasure of watching one of these films at the cinema can be quite difficult if you live outside of Korea's major cities, as our Park Ji-won explains.
Hongcheon County in Gangwon-do Province lies some 100 kilometers east of Seoul, and until this week, residents would have to travel about an hour if they wanted to watch a movie in the theater. But the opening of a small digital film theater in Hongcheon this week has changed that.
I only watched probably 3 films a year. Now I hope to watch more films as the theater is very close to my home.
Hongcheon Cinema is the nation's 4th small digital film theater to open in counties with a population of less than 100,000. The first was in Changsu in 2010, followed by others in Kimjae and Imsi last year. They are all financed by their local governments. Based on their successes, the Culture Ministry plans to support the opening of 80 more small theaters in rural areas nationwide by next year. The ultimate planning is to set up a small film theater in every district or county that does not currently have one. Another area that needs special attention is the independent film sector. Audience numbers for independent films have been on the decline since 2009, while the market share on the top 10 films last year reached some 35%, much higher than in the US at 24% and France at 26%. This is because nearly 95% of the nation's 2,100 screens are operated by the 3 major multiplex chains, CGV, Lotte, and Megabox. All are conglomerates, and they mainly play films that they have produced or invested in. An independent film director who has received many international awards says he still has a hard time finding screens to play his films.
Multiplex chains do not offer their screens up unless it's a film produced or distributed by their own companies. Even if they do, they show them at very unpopular times, like once in the early morning or very late at night. It's unfair.
He added, policymakers and movie fans need to pay attention to low-budget art films or independent films if they want diversity in cinema. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
And TGI Friday, everyone, as we kick things off with one of the biggest golf tournaments with the 2014 Masters, which finished its first round. And even without Tiger Woods in the event, it was still an exciting first round. Of course, on the first day of the event, Bill Haas had a nice day shooting a 4-under overall, having the lead for most part of the day, while Adam Scott, the 2013 winner, finished off at 3 under par. Meanwhile, for South Korean Chae Kyung-ju, aka KJ Choi, not a bad day as well, as he finishes off at 2 under par. And staying in golf, but back here in the nation as the 2014 KLPGA season kicked off on Thursday with the Lotte Mart Women's Open in Jeju. And with the last season's star Chang Han-ah not competing due to her recent participation at the Kraft Nabisco Championship, we have 2 leaders after the first day, as Kim Min-sun and Lee Min-young are tied for first at 7 under par. Meanwhile, An Si-hyun and Kim Hyo-ju aren't too far back as well, as they're tied for 7th at 4 under par. And moving over to figure skating, where the lucky fans who managed to purchase tickets to Kim Yeon-ha's farewell ice show have less than a month until they finally get to see the event. And on Thursday, her program was revealed. And if you're a big fan of the hit animation film Frozen, it's going to be a treat, as the figure queen is set to open her show with her performing to the hit song Let It Go and other medleys of the songs from the movie. And closing off the event will be her performance to Francesco Sartori's Time to Say Goodbye, as the show will take place from May 4th to the 6th. And now moving over to Game 6 of the KBL Championship Series between the Changwon LG Sakers and the Ulsan Mobis Phoebus, with Mobis 1 win away from their 2nd straight title. And just like the entire series, this game is a close one as well, as Mobis takes a slim 38-34 lead at the half, but Mobis' Moon Tae-young puts up 25 points and 11 rebounds before fouling out, helping Mobis take this game 79-76, as Mobis wins back-to-back titles and their 5th overall championship. Meanwhile, Moon Tae-young was named the KBL Championship MVP. And finishing things off with some Thursday night's KBO action, as the Nexon Heroes beat the Kia Tigers 5-2, with the Lotte Giants beating the LG Twins 4-1 on a walk-off home run by Luis Jimenez, while the Tucson Bears beat the SK Wyverns 5-0. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the NC Dinos take on the Hanwha Eagles. Of course, going into the game here in the first inning of the game, Na Sung-bum at bat, and an RBI single to left center field scores Kim Jong-ho, and the Dinos take an early 1-0 lead. But the second inning of the game, Kyum Hae-sung sends it into a deep to left field, going, gone, tie ball game 1-1. Third inning, Felix PA sends this one to center field. This one, a sac fly, gives the Hanwha Eagles the 2-1 lead before Kim Hae-sung at bat is going to ground this one to short. Double play, not in time, 3-1. Fast forward to the 9th inning, game tie 3-3. Ko Dong-jin strikes out, but a pass ball scores Felix PA from third. And that's the eventual game-winning run, as the Hanwha Eagles win this game 4-3, your final score. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great weekend, everyone, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Well, today is pretty much a repeat of yesterday's weather conditions. Temperatures jumping to near 20 degrees Celsius across the region under mostly to partly sunny skies. But the air will continue to remain dry throughout the day. In fact, dry weather watch has been issued for a week now across much of the peninsula. So please drink at least 7 to 8 cups of water a day to stay healthy and hydrated. And I'm sure a lot of you are planning outing this weekend to enjoy the weather and festivals that are happening around the country. Well, unlike we expected, the upper parts of the regions will not receive showers, while areas down south will, but it will be less than 5 millimeters of rainfall. So overall, we'll have less sun, but warm temperatures. So please make the most of your weekend. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The morning low here in the Seoul started at 10, but will rise to 19, and Daegu and Gwangju should pick 22 and 24 respectively, while Busan tops out at 19. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like down on Jeju and Daejeon will pick 19 and 22 respectively, and Mount Kumgang should see a high of 12 this afternoon. Well, that's all I have for you at this hour, and hope you have a wonderful Friday.
And that's all for now. We'll be back for our next newscast at noon, Korea time.